All right, what's up, Mike? What's going on?
Hey, Monty, how are you doing?
All right, all right, all right. All right, so you got the hot mic. So I wanted to run this by you. So,
Hmm.
do you have a take on cancel culture? Like, what do you have a take on cancel culture as it is in the current state of things?
So, cancel culture. Um, that's yeah. Like honestly, like when I think about the phrase cancel culture, just like makes me, uh, it just sort
Cringe.
of yeah. It just like I don't know, and mainly because I feel like it's interesting because we're looking at these situations. Uh, for example, we're looking at like you mentioned, like we talked about before, this idea of Andrew Cuomo, yeah,
Yeah,
and number one, I think we have to sort of separate all the different kind of types of cancel culture.
yeah,
I think the one thing that really drives me nuts is this idea that people the initial thing is that people need to be sort of uniformly and homogeneously pure throughout their life. So, like, if someone has a mistake anywhere in their history, then they have to be held accountable for it in the moment, right? So, like, it's crazy that people are hunting down people's tweets or comments or
yeah,
images from 10, 20, 30 years, like just
yeah,
like digging up like old yearbooks and finding quotes or whatever. Like they just go deep into people's past and go, hey man, you made a weird comment or you told a terrible joke
yeah.
or you said this 30 years ago and now you're a racist. And and I'm going to let everyone know you're a racist or
Yeah, yeah.
you are. And it's weird. It's the part that's problematic is if it's like a crime, right? On the one hand, it's like, hey man, I murdered a guy, 10 years ago, like, okay. Or I assaulted someone, back in the day, then there's
Yeah.
then absolutely, right? That needs to be addressed. But the thing is, you look at someone who, yeah, just what is it? Uh, Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau,
What
he had
happened?
the blackface. He had the
Oh, that.
blackface when he
Okay. Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
when
yeah,
he was when he was I guess in college.
yeah,
He was doing blackface, and then like that that exploded for a while. And that was an issue. Everyone was looking for blackface at that point. Like everyone is searching everyone's
yeah,
search histories for blackface. Any instances,
yeah,
you had like Jimmy Kimmel and his Carl Malone terrible Carl Malone parody. And what was it? Jimmy Fallon had done Chris Rock, I believe, did like
yeah.
blackface Chris Rock, and it was just like, let's look for that. Okay. And then if someone says something about Nazis, okay, now everyone's looking for
Oh,
Nazi stuff. Like it's crazy because it's sort of thematic and everyone's digging up for this stuff. And the part that drives me crazy is the concept of purity tests, right?
yeah.
Because to me, unless I forgive me for being for generalizing, but no one's perfect. Everyone has some sort of crazy things that either that they've done in the past, that they've thought, or that
Yeah.
or that they currently still do, right? And just to pretend, it's so easy to point fingers at other people
Yeah.
because like for me that's the one thing that drives me crazy when like
Well, but I mean, do we have a better pastime than that in America? We do that. We're good at that. Look at that person. They're not as good as they should be. I mean, we're good at that, right? Like that's
but there
very American.
there's a line, so there's a line between sort of checking people, right? And like that's the difference between sort of what I feel what cancel culture is and what just sort of checking people is. Because I think, like, for example, I don't know how common it is around the world, but I know in Canada, like I have a lot of Canadian friends, and for some reason, culturally, a lot of Canadians like to bring people down a peg. You know, like it's interesting that, especially I think at certain parts of like the
Well,
East
but that
Coast or
only
whatever.
that only works in a country where shame works, right? Right? And like
Right.
the thing about America is with Democrats, shame works, right? It works with Democrats, but with Donald Trump, he has no shame. So you did this so and such, like, yeah, I grabbed him by the pee, so that's what I do, right? And he's like, you want me to resign over that? Please get out of my face. But Al Franken, oh, you caught me in this picture and I was kissing this woman that was, or I was making this gesture to this woman that was passed out drunk. I did too much. I resign in shame. So I get it
Well,
works when shame works, right?
well, there are three issues, right? Issue number one is I don't think it's like to kind of build on your concept of shame. It's not so much about like shame itself and shame and lack of shame, but it's this crazy like extreme version. Like
Yeah.
it's that everything is an extreme. It's
Yeah.
either like death penalty or just forgive them. Just let it go.
What are you talking about? It's no big deal. Like, let it go.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no nuance. That's like the first issue. Like I feel like there's no concept of nuance. Like yes, shame is a great thing, or not a great thing, I guess, but shame can be useful, right?
Yes.
But not like you make one mistake, you're fired. You are gone, right? That is not helpful to anyone, right? And then just letting it go is not good for anyone,
So
right? And like you said,
what do you think is this new appeal to you got to be perfect or you no mistakes allowed? Or what do you think this is coming from?
so I think this lack of nuance sort of comes from I think the foundation of it is that people are just busy, right? And it takes time
That's a good
to
point.
think about
That's a
things.
good point.
It takes time to 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 really understand
Yeah.
subtleties
Yeah. So
and
someone comes out
gray
and
areas.
they point and say, hey, everyone be mad at this person right here, and then unplug from your daily life and say, oh, what did he do? Oh, get mad.
Because it's like because
Yeah.
there's a story, right?
Yeah.
It's not you can't isolate one instance without the
That's right.
context,
That's right.
right? So it takes time on both ends. On the
Yep.
one hand, it takes time to explain the full breadth of what the crime or the incidence is, right?
Yeah.
And then number two, people themselves just have lots of other stuff to do. So it's like, do I have the time to actually listen to everything that's going on, right? So I think that is the one thing is that like it takes time to really understand and people don't have the patience or the time to really absorb it.
Yeah.
The second thing is I feel like the culture of social media and the
Oh, yeah,
acceleration
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
information
That's right. That's right. One dot
is
to next
what
dot. Yeah.
exactly. It's just like that's the other part of it is that
Yeah.
it gets condensed even further
Yeah.
so that we don't have to, I guess, but like people are compelled to make judgments very quickly, without even digging deep,
Yeah.
right? Without digging
Well,
deeper into the story,
that I mean, how do you get on social media? How do you get 1,000 likes? You have to
Yeah.
go all the way to one extreme or all the way to the other extreme. You
And
can't play nuance. Yeah.
that's the other element of it too, is that there's incentive.
Yep.
I guess that's part of the social media part, but like there's an incentive because, bombastic comments or sensational comments get attention, right? Subtlety does not, like by nature, doesn't get people's attention, right? And things that are normal and stable do not get any attention. It's the things that are crazy, things that
Yep.
are really extreme, things
That's
that
right.
are totally unexpected or just like full of exaggeration that get attention. And then there's also the sort of natural telephone game that happens, because
Yeah.
you tell someone a story and then the next iteration it kind of gets a copy of a copy of a copy, and then like it just kind of keeps spiraling into this huge tail.
Yep.
That maybe it never was, right? But just by virtue of the imperfections of communication, it passes through a lot of editorials, a lot of different news sources, a lot of different sources, and then by the time it gets to your ears, you know, on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you get your news, then it's crazy. Like, to me, one of the silliest things, one of the silliest gauges of what is happening today is the fact that I feel like comedy shows are legitimate ways now for people to get their news. You know, in the States.
Yeah.
Like, it's hilarious to me that, like, what is it? Last week tonight, John Oliver's show.
That's right.
Trevor Noah's show, Daily Show.
It's one of the remaining places where you can be direct without be directed through irony or sarcasm and still get your point across to a mass group of people, right?
But I think the thing that bothers me so much about it, and I think what most people miss, is the fact that what people are chasing is accountability, in my opinion. Like, the thing is, we want to hold people accountable. The irony is, what drives me crazy about those comedy shows is that none of them, like, they are just as guilty of a lack of accountability as whoever they're targeting, right? Because the traditional sort of argument, I don't know if they say that nowadays, but a lot of times you get the same answer. It's like, hey, why should you be considered a legitimate news source? And, like, a lot of times the comedians will say, like, hey, I'm a comedian, I'm not a journalist, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's really nice for you to comment and for you to say all these things, and then for people to actually buy into your words as actual news. But then when things get prickly or complicated, they're just like, oh, comedy show, not news, you know?
Well, heck, that's Fox News. Fox News is technically they're not technically considered a news organization, right?
So, oh, sorry. That happened during the opinion section, not the news
section.
Oh,
no.
All right.
They are considered an entertainment channel. Like, they're not considered a news channel.
Oh, really?
So when they were,
I thought they had like a specific news segment. And
when they were sued in court, and their lawyers said, hey, technically we're not a news channel. Yeah. But okay.
So they're like wrestling. They're like, well, they're like the World Wrestling Entertainment. They're just like, hey, we're not.
Well, it's not World
sports,
Wrestling.
Man.
It's World Wrestling Entertainment. But
it's entertainment.
I want to switch gears here. So we go from the introduction to the I forgot what was the second stage you said.
The antithesis.
So yes.
So what's going the other way?
Yeah. So what is good about cancel culture? Is there anything good about it?
So on the other side, to me, I think that something is better than nothing. So if we're overcorrecting, so I see the spirit of cancel culture being, I think it would be useful if it were if it was doled out equally, you know? Like, if it were a matter of everyone was getting canceled, I guess I don't have a problem with everyone being canceled.
Yeah.
Or everyone not being canceled, right? Like, if it were happening sort of like across the board equally, then I think that's great. That's fine, because I feel like there would be like a natural correction. But because it seems like things are being selectively canceled, then that's problematic, right?
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
Because that's the thing. It's like, I think it's a version of accountability, right?
That's right.
So, for example, like, if someone did do something inappropriate with a woman in college or whatever, and it only sort of came to light after digging through some evidence, through the history, and it comes up today, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to be held accountable to that, whatever, right? Or if someone did something like really racist, 15 years ago or said like a racist joke, then their career shouldn't be buried. But
Well, yeah.
I think it's
So,
important for people to have that conversation. You know,
well,
unfortunately, the thing is that I feel like a lot of times people are building up like uh, they're sort of building up a tolerance for that sort of rhetoric, so that instead of saying like, "Hey, you made a racist comment," this is part of the nuance part, right? It's just like,
yeah,
"Hey, you made a racist comment like
yeah,
13 years ago," and someone will just automatically say, I already apologized for that." You know,
yeah.
cancel culture, forget it. And then they just keep being racist maybe now, or whatever. Like
Well,
there's so much sort of backlash against the backlash that
well,
that it sort of it ends up being counterproductive. That it actually ends up perpetuating that behavior from, you almost feel justified because everyone. I think the other thing that drives me crazy, this is kind of going off into another direction, is that I feel like these days people are so good at turning themselves into victims.
yeah, and that's why I wanted to go with this. Is the purpose of cancel culture to change behavior, or is it to display the little bit of power that I have over other people? Because I do think the great majority of us, we're living relatively small lives. Even those of us where even if you're lucky enough to start running a business, or you have a family, you juggle, you're spinning plates, whatever. Even in such a situation, you're still in a situation where you're not as important as, I don't know, the most important 1% of people on the planet. So when you have this opportunity to take your little bit of power or what have you and use it to throw stones for people that feel pretty much unimportant or insignificant, it gives them a bit of power, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I
it
was
feels
one of
good.
those. I was one of those 5,000 likes of people who liked this comment that said that so and such is rotten and they should just get cut, whatever, right?
Yeah,
And it
I mean,
gives
yeah. As far
insignificant
as
people a little bit of power. Yeah,
as far as what the benefits of cancel culture are, yeah, absolutely. Like it's something that, yeah, you can point to that as, it's very natural for people to want to affect change in the world,
yeah,
right? Not even just like, yeah, like whether people feel insignificant in their lives or not, it's just there's a natural impulse to be like, whoa, I impacted the world somehow,
yeah,
right? Like what I did or what I said caused some change, some sort of visible change. And that there's something very seductive about that, right? It's like, whoa, hey, there's a rush to
yeah. I
being able to
matter.
do something
I
like that,
matter.
right?
Yeah,
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 exactly. It's like, oh wow, like I exist. And I matter, right? But ultimately, I think when I think of that impulse, I think of a child. Like I think of myself as a kid, like scratching things into trees and literally throwing rocks into windows and stuff like that. Like, hey, look at me. You, I'm causing some damage. Like my version
yeah.
of affecting the world was effectively damaging it, right? And I feel like that's a very like to me, I feel like that's very childish. But I do understand that impulse though. Like I think that is a very real thing because change is change. Change is change. Like if you can, there's an aspect of life or something very natural about wanting to a prove that you matter,
Yeah.
right? But also have some sort of legacy. I guess it's kind of tied together, but like have something that have doing something that does affect the world and the future in some capacity, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is, like I said, like I think it is, as far as like if it were consistent, I think it would be more useful because you know you can hit everybody with a sledgehammer and cause everyone to resign or cause ruin people's careers, ruin people's because honestly on so here's the thing, because it's not me, there's a part of me that looks at it very big picture, and so like, okay, look, we can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. So sure, there's going to be injustices for, okay, so this one comedian guy that Saturday Night Live guy, I can't remember his name now, but like, okay, he lost his career totally.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. You know, like it's like, you know, he's a casualty of maybe a more progressive society.
Yeah.
Like it sucks for him, and I would love to, you know, you know, it sucks for him, but I think the larger movement, I think, is better. I think I like erring on the side of some level of accountability than for us to be like, yeah, let's just let it go. Let's let it go. Let's let everything go. Let's let everything just sort of go by, because I feel like that is the wrong direction. Like if like it's much harder to build restrictions uh, out of total sort of anarchy than it is to be like, oh, this is a little bit too conservative. Let's tone it down a bit.
And this is one of the problems with absolutes, right?
Sure.
It's very easy for someone on the right to say everything about, I don't know, insert politician, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, whatever. Everything about them is wrong. And it's very easy for someone on the left to say everything about Trump is wrong. But one of the things about Donald Trump, and I think one reason why he became so popular, and it's probably an important part of what he's doing, is he's pushing back as a check against council culture. Like, hey guys, just because you don't like somebody and they did something that you don't like, you can't just cancel them. And I think that's something that resonated with people. Like, you got to give some wiggle room. And if someone pushes back and says, you know what, I'm not really that sorry because at the time I felt that way and that's what I did. And maybe it's not congruent with 2021 sensibilities, but it was 1920. It's like 1990 when I did that. It was 2021 or 2012 when I did that. It wasn't 2021. So you can't hold me accountable by today's standards for something that I did 12 years ago. Like, I'll give you an example, right? You know the Pepe Le Pew, right? Did you hear about this? You remember Pepe Le Pew?
I'm aware of the cartoon, but did something happen with that?
Well, just like they're talking about like rewriting the cartoon because he is being I don't want to say rapist, but just very over. It was like
he's very rapey. He's not a rapist, but he's very rapey.
Yeah. So they're talking about like they're gonna have to like either like cancel some of those cartoons, they're gonna have to like rewrite them, and like that whole thing is like it's like this real time rewriting the rules of what was okay.
But that's the thing that's so problematic, right? That's the thing that's so problematic is that I'm looking at that specific instance from the perspective of a dude. Like when I grew up, I just thought it was kind of goofy and funny and just like, oh, I thought that was just sort of like that was not necessarily what I thought what gender roles were, but I just saw it as kind of harmless. But I'm not a girl. So I'm not sure if I were a girl and I was looking at that same thing, if that instilled some sense of objectification or inherent submission or just like, you know.
Well, and this is the hard
if that
part.
was psychologically damaging in some
Well,
capacity.
yeah, but this is the hard part, right? Like, and I think I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this when he was talking about like how people that consider themselves gender fluid or LGBTQ, like using certain pronouns, and if you don't use those pronouns, you feel slighted or you feel offended. It's like where the lines keep moving, right? Like
this is why nuance is important, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because the idea is you cannot rule the majority based on the smallest fringes, right? Like, again, well, you know, it's arguable, right? Because like if you look at from the perspective of like handicapped or handicapable or differently abled people. I'm
Yeah,
not sure what
you know
what the
what?
right
That's
term is.
right there. That's a really good example, right there,
Right.
right?
Like what the
Because remember,
terminology is,
because
right?
remember when we were in school, we used the R word, right, for special needs, right?
Well,
And
for mentally
oh yeah, yeah,
challenged
special
people.
needs, yeah. So, and you know what's funny is in 5 years, special needs might be darn
Right.
near curse word. So,
Might be unacceptable.
so yeah,
But the idea is like I had heard something recently about this idea where uh, putting ramps in everywhere is not like doesn't hurt anyone. So that's a fine application of things. But in my opinion, I feel like for the most part, we cannot, and this is just my opinion, is that it seems ludicrous to enforce something on the majority only for the fringes, right? But with the exception of unless it just has no basically no ill effect, right? So like having ramps everywhere, it doesn't really inconvenience anyone, right? It's just sort of like a pure benefit. And I'm not sure how much it actually costs to actually to do that, but ultimately, sure, it's worthwhile because it sucks to need a ramp and not have
and they have
because
one.
like
That's right.
yeah because yeah like I never felt more sympathy than when like I broke my foot and I had to use my crutches everywhere and I'm just like, oh my god, I wish I could park closer to the building. I wish I could just walk up a ramp and use an elevator. I'm just like going upstairs and stuff. I'm just like, oh my god, this is hell. So I get it to a small degree. I get it. So, but to me, when you look at something like, look, to me, it's not that big a deal to use different pronouns for people who want to be addressed with different pronouns. It's fine. Doesn't really hurt me too much, but it seems a bit excessive that like all documentation, like be other. You know what? Like I grew up being other for the majority of my life, and then or having to learn what Pacific Islander meant. It was always Asian Pacific Islander. I was just like, what is that? What does that mean? I grew up in the States, but Asian Pacific Islander, whatever that means. And it's just like, okay, did that screw me up somehow?
Well, how old were you when you learned that you shouldn't say Oriental, you should say Asian American? Like that happened somewhere between junior high school. But
and that's the other. That's the other thing. It's like, you've got like Latinx, right? I mean, this is kind of going into another direction.
I don't even understand that. Like, I don't understand what that means.
Well, it's because of the patriarchal aspect, right? Because if you say Latino, you're excluding Latinas, right?
Wow.
Women. But if you're living in a non-binary sort of gender situation, then neither O or A, or is that right? O or A. I can't remember. Spanish is like left me. But yeah, like you're leaving someone out, and so you use Latinx. But then there are the statistics where it's like only 16% of people that will identify as Latinx, and then like the vast majority of Hispanic. I'm not sure. But
and this is one thing that as I guess we bring this together as the synthesis. I think one of the casualties that's going to become of this is just simply put authenticity, right? Like I think that's one of the reasons why we really enjoy comedians right now, because like that's one of the last few outlets where people can just say, I'm being sarcastic and all of my words are measured, but I'm going to get as close to the line as I possibly can and make these jokes. And people really appreciate that. Like Bill Burr is a really good example of this. Like he's hilarious. Bill Burr is hilarious, and he knows where those lines are. And he tight ropes in the line. He says what he says, and he makes you laugh.
The thing is, he doesn't know. Like, no one knows until you cross it, right?
That's right.
Like you get there, and then you're like, oh, okay, the reaction is not the way it should be, and then you take a step back. Like, that's the thing. It's like you should not get your head chopped off when you cross the line. The idea is the way that you correct your, like the process of correcting yourself is you make your mistake. Like that's the thing that I feel like the simplest lesson that people seem to be ignoring is that you learn from mistakes. Like that's the whole thing. So if you try to create an environment where you're not allowed to make mistakes,
Yeah.
then your learning is stunted. Your capacity to evolve, you are retarding your ability to
Oh,
to
be careful! Be
learn,
careful! Be careful
right?
now! Be
Like
careful!
that's the idea. You're turning everyone to a retard, basically.
Whoa! You're gonna get canceled, Mike.
So, but that's my point. Is like that's the idea where, you know, people need to be allowed to make mistakes, but there needs to be a process, right? It's like, look, I made a mistake, and then people call me out on that mistake, or I know it's a mistake, and then there's that process of like, okay, let's have a conversation.
Again, what is the end goal? Is the end goal I want to exercise my power as a small person to say I got you, or is it the betterment of everyone so that we have a society that's more understanding and more receptive to minorities, whatever those minorities might be, right?
To me, it's not so much about authenticity is absolutely important, but to me, I think the overarching sort of thread is accountability, because just what you're talking about, it's like, what is your goal? If it's what you're saying your goal is, a lot of the people who talk about the virtue, a lot of people who do the virtue signaling, they say it's in the spirit of, you know, a greater society.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. It's like, I want the world to be a better place. That's why this world is there's no room for racism here. There's no room for, you know, for sexual aggression. There's no room for, yeah, exactly. There's no room for, you know, corruption, lies, whatever. But then, like you said, you know, if that's the case, then absolutely the logical conclusion would be, it's like, well, if your goal is that, then we need to focus on how to correct these issues.
Yeah.
Not just let's just eliminate everyone who doesn't agree with us, you know, or ultimately that's what it's kind of become. It's not even supposed to be like disagreements. It's supposed to be, people that have done something that's really terrible.
I would imagine when people go to work now, especially in America, like, you talk about sports, you talk about the weather, you talk about like vanilla stuff, and you go home. Like when someone says, "Did you see?" Like, I be honest with you, like, I don't think people even talk politics at work. Like, politics, current events, just
it's exhausting.
Like,
it's exhausting to talk about that stuff, you know.
And like, you just avoid all of the red button issues, get out of there, get your paycheck, and go home. And that, I think that is the ultimate place where this cancel culture is taking people, right?
And that's the opposite of what the stated goal is. Is that like when people shut down, when you create an atmosphere where everyone decides to shut down, then nothing is going to get fixed.
And I would think that I would say that there is no better illustration of this than intersex dynamics in the workplace, right? Like if this were 20 years ago and your coworker got a haircut, you can just walk and say, "Oh, you got a haircut yesterday. Yeah, it looks nice." You can't say that now. You cannot say that now. I would not even consider walking in. I wouldn't even mention a haircut. Like, I would just walk at the person. "Good morning. How are you doing today? Nice to see you. Okay, let's get to work." I wouldn't even go there. And it is a casualty of just being humane, right? Like, just being social. Like, "Oh, is that a new dress? Are those new earrings? Oh, I like them. That's really cool." And go back to your job. Like, if that person feels like, "Oh, that person made me feel uncomfortable because someone such and such, and I'm going to HR," and it becomes a big brouhaha, what does that do to everyone that was involved in that situation? Okay,
Well,
because you almost got canceled, right? So go ahead.
but here's the thing. What's interesting, actually, now that you mention that, the solution to me is very simple. It's basically better communication, right? Because ultimately, if it's a situation where, let's just say, two people are in an office, one person says something that one other person doesn't like, the two of them need to have a conversation about it, you know? And if they can't have a conversation about it and then quash it in the moment, like that is the problem, you know? Like if it turns into like a weird camp where people separate and this person turns into makes it a campaign against this other person and like but does it anonymously or spreads and just does this whole thing, then that defeats the purpose. Like these two people need to be able to talk it out and go like, you know what, this is how these words make me feel, and this person says, oh, I didn't mean to do it that way, or that's not my intent, or this is where I was coming from, or actually I kind of like you, or who knows, like this, it's like, oh well, that's never going to happen, and blah blah blah, and then, like that conversation happens, and then hopefully it disappears.
Well,
but it's because people don't want to talk or aren't able to talk, then these things get exacerbated and people can hide, you know.
But I think your point of view is a bit idealistic, and I'll tell you why. Let's just say an example. Okay, let's say that I broke up with my girlfriend or my longtime girlfriend, and I'm feeling powerless, down in the dumps, right?
Sure.
And I want to feel like I matter. I could take an innocuous, just a meaningless or comment and just take it and say, I can't understand why you do that. Why would you say something like that to me? And like all of a sudden at work, I matter. I'm a big deal. I'm getting attention. And like, I'm not saying that I'm that type of person, but there are those types of people out there. And so if you have a conversation, like I would say, if I were the person having a conversation with that kind of person, I would want to make sure that there were many people in the presence of us. I would make sure that the conversation is recorded. I would make sure, maybe even have it video recorded, just to make sure that this said person couldn't say, oh, he said this and he said this and he said this, because it's just different. It's a different society, right?
But that speaks to another, that actually is speaking to another big issue, right? Which is social contracts and trust.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned it a moment ago, it's society.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. It's like when you were describing that whole process, that is unfortunately is kind of a sad reality of this idea of like you have to record yourself, you CYA, yeah. Right? Like make sure you got the documentation.
Yep.
And it's like that is no way to live. You don't want to be like you don't want to have to be storing evidence against everyone around you at all times, just in case.
And that's why I feel like Donald Trump grabbed so much like of people's like emotion, and like they really want, because they're like, hey man, this is going too far. Like I remember we used to go to work and we could make jokes at the water cooler. We can't do that anymore. Or like it's just there, like this whole like focus on being as politically correct as possible has kind of sort of taken a bit of the humanity out of just people's interactions, because you say the wrong thing to the wrong person and then you're talking about getting canceled, and it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
I mean, the thing, yeah, like ultimately, you know, to me, it's like you have this, like case number one is you have an incident with someone and you're just like, well, I'm never going to see you again, so who cares? Doesn't matter, right? It's like, oh, you know, one person says, oh, that guy was a jerk, or that gal was kind of a snob, and then you just part ways. You never see each other again. Doesn't matter, right? Scenario two, you guys have like a quick conversation, and maybe one person, you know, they might be like, oh, okay, sorry, maybe it's a miscommunication. Maybe they're able to talk it out. Maybe that's the ideal situation that hopefully doesn't really exist. But it's just like, you talk it out, and then you go your separate ways, right? And then there's like the shouting match, right? Where it's just like one side, whether it had to do with the whatever, it turns into something else. Where maybe the initial incident was something minor, but then suddenly it becomes this like, now I need to destroy you because you don't do that to me, and then that becomes like this sort of eye for an eye until the world goes blind contest.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, to me, the communication aspect is not it is the idealistic sort of vision, but that's the only way that it works.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Like, there's also the let it go path, where it's just like, okay, well, whatever, let people be. But in terms of progress, like, people need to learn how to communicate with each other, and I feel like so much of it can, and it's easier said than done, absolutely, but the idea is that should be the mentality. That should be where we're kind of headed, because ultimately a lot of these problems can be like, it reminds me of that movie. Have you seen the movie Marriage Story?
No, I haven't. Marriage.
Okay.
Marriage.
So just like really quickly, like basically what happens is the story of that movie is, it sort of it outlines a divorce between a couple, right? And initially, when the two people, their divorce is kind of coming apart, but in the moment they feel like things are amicable, so they're able to kind of talk. But then one of them gets a lawyer, and then the lawyer like basically starts turning this guy turns I think the guy into an enemy, and then the guy gets a lawyer, and then once the lawyers get in, then it's like a death fight. Just like, they're digging up all the negative stuff, like, you're a bad father, you're a bad mom. Everything gets dragged out publicly in the court. All this stuff starts coming out, and these two people suddenly, they hate each other. And like all throughout the movie, it's like, man, like, why did we get all these other people involved? We could have talked this out. Like, we were fine. We were like friendly. Like in the beginning of the movie, they were just like, they loved each other. They cared about each other. It was just, they didn't have they weren't brave enough to be able to talk about the details about how to go about it. And so they just kind of let it go. And then at one point, I think someone suggested that one of them gets a lawyer. And then like once the lawyers got in, then it turned into into a fight. And that's what I feel like is happening with a lot of people, is that like, instead of doing the simple thing of actually just hashing it out, taking the steps to actually just talk it through with the person, and respecting each other as, human beings with different opinions.
Yeah.
And again, very idealistic, but as you get older, you realize like that's the simplest path. Like, if you're able to just kind of like talk to people and just say like, hey, I made a mistake, or, oh, I misunderstood that, like, oh, I didn't realize you were, whatever. And then like you can just sort of quell those issues in the moment, right? As opposed to having them turn into these sort of death matches.
Well, I would say that, and we'll kind of wrap this up so that this doesn't run too long, but I would say one of the most valuable lessons I've learned here, and especially I learned this lesson coaching basketball, is that winning or losing is not always necessarily the most important thing. Who won, who lost. That for us as Americans, it's really easy to look at who's the winner, who's the loser, and say, hey, I won, or hey, he beat me. But what might, I would say in more nuanced situations, is what is winning and how did you win? How did you lose? Because in America, we cannot fathom the idea of losing properly. There is a proper way to lose. There's a proper way to win. But this is something that I learned coaching basketball. There is a proper way to lose. There's a proper way to win. Like you beat someone, you don't get in their face and say, ha ha, I got you, ha ha, I'm better than you, I'm the winner. Like in America, that's normal. But here, that is absolutely the way to lose after you win, right? And the other way, the other way is when you lose and you're gracious and you say, you know, you got me this time and I did my best, but you know, my hat off to you. You win when you lose. So sometimes we get so caught up, and I would say certainly in American culture, I want to make sure that everyone knows that I'm right. So I'm going to win at all costs so everyone knows that I'm right. But in that, let's just say our example, right? We're talking about the HR and you get to the fight with the person and it might have been two good employees and one employee looks at the other one and says, you said something to me that offended me. I want you fired. Now imagine what happens to that workplace when one person who everyone or the great number of people got along with, they like that person, and it gets around the work environment that, oh, this person, he got fired because allegedly he said so and such as this person. And they would say, oh, that guy, he was a really nice guy. I can't really imagine that. What happens to the social dynamic of that workplace? People become robots. They walk in, good morning, good afternoon, good night, and they go back home, right? So who won? Who's the winner, right?
But the thing is, like, I'm going to push back a little bit in that I feel like what complicates that scenario is different people have different purposes and they get off on different things, or they are motivated by different things.
That's right.
And like the simplest example that I have is like when I play games. Like I played competitive games when I was younger, and there are some people that just liked beating other people. The joy that they got from competing was in defeating someone else.
Yeah.
And so that was not compatible with my goal, which was to engage but have fun.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like I wanted to do my best, but I was always kind of more lighthearted, and I didn't really take it as seriously because I was just like, I just enjoyed the process. And then like when I met people who were just like, who would just get, if I won and they just made it a miserable experience, they're just like, oh, you only won because of this and this and this. And they came up with excuses. And I'm just like, okay. And then when they won, they're just like, yeah, I'm better than you. Know? Like, it was just it was like, it was terrible when they won, terrible when they lost from my point of view.
Yeah.
But when I talk to them about it, they're just like, yeah, but I enjoy it. That's why, whatever. And I'm just like, really? It doesn't seem like you enjoy it, but okay. And so like, that's the thing. It's like, sometimes those instances are not compatible. It's like, if my enjoyment comes specifically from making you feel bad, then it's like, okay.
But that's a lesson you learn with kids as kids, right? I lost, so I'm gonna take my ball and go home. Hey guys, let's play today. I don't really feel like playing with you today. We're gonna go play over here, but enjoy your ball. Like that's that's what happens.
That's the thing. But that's where to me, that's where the communication comes in, where it's just like, hey man, you do realize that if you do X, like if you take your ball away, then you don't get to play. It's like, and if you pitch a fit and you're just like, well, I don't care, I'm just, whatever. And then you hold a grudge, then maybe people stop inviting you to play, and then the other people they get their own ball and they end up playing. And there are other consequences and things that you can kind of talk through or experience through or whatever. And then who knows how things are going to balance out. But that's just an example of like just two different motivations, right? And I feel like there are lots of different motivations for people. Like again, it's like Batman. It's like some people just want the world to burn, right? And you have to account for people who have like different motivations. And that was something for me that was tough too. Is that like I'd like to think I think one of the fundamental assumptions that people make is that everyone thinks the same way that they do, right? And when you have those realizations about XYZ, you assume that everyone is kind of on the same wavelength. But the older I get, the more I realize that, man, like the only one that thinks like me is me. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I am not Joe Average as I think I am. I am just this one dude with this one set of opinions, and everyone else is going in infinite different directions with infinite different motivations that change over time also. And it's like we're all just like all these ping pong balls, just like being shaken up into a
Yeah.
globe, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, well, who it's and so that's why it's tough for me to say like, you know, the the ultimate purpose for all of us is to kind of to make progress. And it's like not everyone's on that page, I feel like.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm just like, I have to, like, in my mind, in my sort of fledgling way of thinking, I'm just like, well, I kind of have to respect that some people aren't into that in this moment,
Yeah.
so I'm just like,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it tough, right?
We'll try and get as many people on the we team as possible.
Yeah. And so that's why, kind of going back to that idea, is that like that's where I feel like you have to go to the majority, and you're just like, okay, if the majority of us are okay saying retard, okay, it's fine, and when the majority of us say like, okay, you know what, intolerable, like one instance of racism is intolerable, if
Well,
if we're all saying that,
well,
then
and then of
sure.
course, what's important is not necessarily the action, but the intent behind it. Now, if the
Yeah,
intent
and
is, if the and that's the nuance, right? Like if the intent is clear, then that person needs to be brought down a couple pegs. But if it's an innocent mistake, or even if it's not an innocent mistake, it's just a mistake. You
yeah.
can say, hey, you know what? So and such is the case. He might have done what he should have done, but you know what? We're all human.
I'm sorry, but like it's weird. I don't have all the information about this, but that this just reminds me of Brett Kavanaugh, and I'm just like that whole situation with Brett Kavanaugh just like kind of drives me nuts. But um,
Which part of it?
because like because I feel like there was a clear pattern of behavior that was emerging, and the process just got cut short of figuring out like what was going on.
Yeah.
So maybe he has atoned over the years. It's possible. But like, and again, for me, I'm to me, there wasn't enough information.
Yeah.
It was too soon to make a judgment. And I feel like, who knows, right? Maybe if it's hanging over him, like in my sort of fantasy, the spec
Hanging
the
over
spec
him. You
yeah,
mean
the
you mean like
specter of
you think ghosts hang over powerful people when they get power?
well, no, what I'm saying is that like it's kind of like, I mean, again, I don't know all the intricacies of it because he has made some really shady judgments since he's gotten in. But like, I feel like because he knows there are eyes on him, that maybe he's kind of it's like, you know what, I dodged a
Yeah.
bullet. People are looking out for me.
I would say yes if it wasn't a lifetime appointment, but there's no
like,
check on him anymore. There's no check. Like the only check on him is I don't want to do it anymore, or his heart stops beating. So what's the check?
Well, there are, because the thing is he has to deal with the other justices, right? There's the other dynamic, and I mean that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah,
But like,
yeah.
but the idea is that like I said, I'm not optimistic about this point of view. But what I'm saying is that there's in my fantasy there is this specter of guilt, the same way I feel about Clarence Thomas, frankly, where it's just like, you know, basically I'm hoping that like the sort of I dodged a bullet, but let me not make any waves. So I'm not ever going to be sort of Chief Justice,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe, but like because just kind of be a follower and not like a leader. But yeah, like I think at the end of the day, I think that people just need to be held to more account. You know, people need to be accountable for, like, I'm hoping things will move in a direction where everyone takes more accountability for their actions, you know, like, and we'll see how those processes happen. But like, basically, you know, it's whether it is the eye for an eye, like ultimately you're going to be in the crosshairs. If you create a society or you create an atmosphere where you pluck everyone's eyes out, you know, then sooner or later, people are going to dig into your stuff. Yeah, they're going to dig into your stuff, and they're going to be plucking your eyes out, and then eventually everyone's going to be blind, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, and so metaphorically, and so hopefully that metaphorical sort of process will ultimately move people. I'm hoping the majority, again, will hopefully move the majority toward a system where that's not the case, where we are like, okay, actually, you know, but the thing is, I understand that. I think that the other part of cancel culture is a lack of appreciation for how real change happens, right?
Yeah, real
Like,
change.
Real change.
Not like change for the camera, like actual change.
Right. Like actual change is slow, meticulous, and methodical, right? Like basically it's just like very incremental and just like so this sort of radical sort of like, okay, you made a mistake, you're gone, like that kind of stuff, that's very brittle, and that stuff never really lasts, and a lot of times will come back and you know, just kind of like it'll a lot of that's zero sum. But if you want to like try to actually make progress, then you need to start having those conversations. You need to get better at those conversations. You need to sort of look at all the details. You need to take the time to do all that stuff, and hopefully, you know, develop those habits, and then hopefully the people around you do, and then like the more that happens, like the more people get used to it, kind of thing.
All right. Well, hey, Mike. I like this one. This is a good one, Mike. Yeah, this is a good one, Mike. Yeah. I like
as opposed to some of those bad ones, right? You're just communicating.
No.
This is how you're communicating to me. It's like, you know what? I got to be honest, Mike. They're not all good.
No,
they're not.
no. They're just. I mean,
this one's a good one.
Well, life is nuanced. Life is nuanced. There's no like A button, B button, C button off.
I feel attacked, man. I feel attacked.
Oh yeah, oh gosh, I feel attacked that you're saying that I'm attacked. So
what you think I'm being too aggressive in my objection?
I'm aggressive. I feel attacked that you used the word aggressive. That's a microaggression. You said aggression, so that's a microaggression by default for me. I'm playing, but this is good, Mike.
I'm triggering you. All right, man.
All right, well, all right.
I'll catch you on the next one.
Catch you next one. All right.